I always tell people, if you want to have a seat at the table in marketing and BD, you don't have to be a pricing expert, but you can always put on the client hat and just ask those questions.
Welcome to Firm Favourites. I'm your host, Alice Ramsey. It's so good to have you on the podcast that positions legal marketing and business development teams where they belong, as firm favourites. Powered by Clerk, the legal tech platform that makes commercial content instantly available, which is a must for all legal marketing and business development teams. This episode, we talk with Sara Miller, Director of Marketing and Business Development at Tilleke Gibbins in Bangkok. Sara shares some really great insights on how she built a truly international career. She gives some expert tips on how to ensure you really understand your clients' needs. And she shares some absolute gold on the art of pitching and proposals. Sara makes a very generous offer at the end of the episode, so I really recommend to listen right through the end and not miss out. So there's a lot of goodness to soak in here. Sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy this episode with Sara Miller. Sara Miller, Director of Marketing and Business Development at Tilleke Gibbins. Good morning and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Nice to meet you, Alice.
A lot of the people we're talking to in this podcast are Europe-based, and your firm is all about servicing people who want to do good business in Southeast Asia in particular. Can you give me sort of a day in the life of Sara Miller from really a bit of the detail? What's it like where you live and how do you get to work and what's the office like? And I'm really curious what it looks like.
So right now I'm looking out at a beautiful view of the river and not looking forward to my commute home, even though I only live 4K away from the office. So again, Jakarta, Manila, Bangkok is up there as far as traffic, and it's rainy season. So getting home once you get in the cab can take 10 minutes or 2 hours. But it's funny how everyone here just adapts to that and gets on with their life. It's just part of the norm.
We're talking to a woman who has had a truly international career. I remember when I was first going for jobs and they were asking about, do you have experience working with different cultures and in an international environment? And I remember thinking, oh, yes, I'm a woman of the world, no problem. But actually, in reality, it's huge. How have you thought about integrating into the different culture of working in Bangkok?
That's a really great question. And obviously, some of the nuances in our markets, we have 7 offices across 6 countries in Southeast Asia, and we're very proudly the largest independent Thai firm. So with a long history, we go back to 1890. So really fascinating history. So obviously, there are different nuances in each of our markets. While you don't want to stereotype, there are certain trends in communication styles, how people do business, that again, you just need to be aware of. And I guess for me, it's always been about just listening really deeply and observing and also having that curiosity. So again, you're listening and you might hear a yes, but is that a yes? And I'm not speaking just about Thailand. I've worked across lots of cultures with that. What does that actually mean in their context? When are people going to be comfortable speaking in a meeting? How can you make sure everyone is comfortable having an opinion? I can't tell you how many meetings I've been to where everyone's been given the opportunity to speak. But again, until you ask someone by name, did you have anything you'd like to add? And then you get this beautiful insight. So again, you don't want to stereotype it across any cultures, but it's just being mindful of making sure everyone's comfortable enough to have a voice, I think. And again, paying attention and being curious and trying to dig under the surface, ask questions. Humility, I think, is really important. sense of humor, I think, is important in making really big life changes.
Such great insights, and insights I think that can only actually be given by someone who has had a truly international career like yours. Sara, tell me, where did it all begin? Where was your first job?
I got my first job in Australia in Brisbane back during the mining boom. And actually I think I moved from Seattle Professional Services to Brisbane. And actually, I found that a really huge cultural shift, even though everyone spoke English, just in sort of how comfortable people might be in being direct or not. It was really a big shift for me. So I found even within, sort of, I guess, Australia, the US, I've worked a little bit in the UK, there can be massive differences. And I think the principles are always the same about making moves, being sensitive, being curious, listening, creating safe spaces.
So now you're in Bangkok. You've been there a year. What attracted you to this position in particular in the first place? And critically, it feels like you're well embedded and you're on a roll. What's keeping you there?
Those are all really great questions. So I'd had the opportunity, I guess, towards sort of the last maybe 10 years to work in regional and global roles. So I was at General Electric before my last firm, and again, started to step up into taking some regional and global connectivity in business development. And I really enjoyed that. So I was very lucky to get a role after that in Singapore that was very regional and global. And again, I love the opportunity to try to understand both local markets, client needs, nuances, but then also trying to pull a firm together to bring the best of a firm to whether it's a regional or a global or, a two-country cross-border transaction. So I think there's so much you can learn as part of that process. So I really enjoyed that side of my role. So when I saw this role come up at Tilleke and based in Bangkok, was super excited. There was no way I wasn't, going to get in touch. And again, I think it's just if you look at our markets, there's so much pace as far as different levels of economic development, interest and investment from other jurisdictions, different regulatory regimes, some big changes we're seeing around data privacy, AI. We're seeing a lot about some of the European regulations around supply chain management start to kind of get pushed further out. And because Tilleke and Gibbins, we have great domestic clients, but then we're also very internationally focused. I really do get to work across all worlds around understanding client needs, what's happening that's important for our clients to know locally, but then what's also happening globally, and what are, I guess, trends in client buying behavior at a global scale, because that often does, and it is starting to come into some jurisdictions in Southeast Asia. Where we haven't seen like complex reverse auctions, right? Isn't a typical sort of way to buy legal services in Southeast Asia, but that's starting to come here too. So I guess there's always something new, something different, something to learn. And again, and how we can bring the best of our firm to our clients wherever they are. But then also I got very lucky with the culture here. I've seen increasingly over the years, marketing and business development in professional services having a better seat at the table as far as being in the value chain. And again, there's always that conversation about marketing and BD, don't be an order taker, add value, create efficiency. And I'm increasingly seeing an appetite for marketing and business development professionals to bring that. I see more teams being client facing when it's appropriate in some markets and really offering proactive advice and ideas. And again, I think marketing and BD can do so much around connectivity. Again, bringing the right people, resources to the firm, staying connected to markets and clients. And Tilleke is very supportive of that. I'm very, very lucky indeed. As far as, again, being open to ideas about how we can stay in pace, with our clients and what their needs are, or help them look ahead as well, of course. So again, culturally, it's a really fantastic place. And diversity is just part of our DNA. That's just another point I'd like to mention. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a very important personal value of mine. And if you look at the stats on our female leadership, it's really remarkable. And again, it's just part of our DNA and who we are, and all the other good inclusion initiatives. So that's been really lovely to see.
How do you think the firm has achieved such an impressive walking the talk of diversity and inclusion, particularly in leadership?
I see a lot of diversity. I think it needs to be bottom up and top down as well. But I think we're really lucky with our leaders and the partnership. For instance, our two managing directors are both women and absolutely fantastic leaders. And again, they're very supportive of DEI as a culture. And so again, I think that can become embedded very easily when you kind of start to see that success.
Sara, now switching gears a bit, I have to ask you about AI. What do you see over there in legal marketing and business development in terms of AI and how it's transforming things?
I think from a marketing and business development, just internal team perspective, there's so much opportunity. Going back to what I said about shifting marketing and BD further up the value chain, if you think again about how some of these tools can take away just some of the grunt admin work from a chamber's, matter collection, deal management, pitching, there's an awful lot potentially there, and we're definitely exploring that. But again, I think that just frees up marketing and BD to have time to look externally what's going in the market, to look at other law firms. What are our competitors doing that we're not? Talking to our partners, what are you hearing? How can we line up to take advantage of this? And again, help our clients in an emerging space. I feel like everyone talked about it for years and years and years, and I didn't actually see a lot of tangible results. But I do feel like momentum has shifted on that a little bit. So I think we're going to start seeing that become more of day-to-day life. I mean, ChatGPT, right, is ubiquitous. An interesting thing about, though, if you think about some of the tools, though, and thinking about language, there's a lot of opportunity there when you're working with teams that are trilingual, bilingual. Again, I see it as a real enabler potentially of diversity in some ways. So fingers crossed on that.
Fingers crossed, absolutely. Sara, I'm really curious, what have you noticed about the position of marketing and business development professionals within the firms that you've worked at across your career?
I started out in marketing and BD leadership, and then I went into specializing in pitching and proposals for quite some time. We were seeing a lot more people doing full-time pitch pursuit proposals, winning work roles, but they were often sitting alone or siloed. It wasn't as common to have big teams here. With client buying behavior getting more sophisticated, you were starting to really see the need for specialists when you're looking at a 5-phase reverse auction that takes, buying process of 2 years. You really do need specialists on the ground. So anyways, I was really involved in advocacy there, talking to people, mentoring them. Again, how do they raise their profile, exactly as you said, from a particular function, internally. So again, very, very happy to talk about it.
That's great. Thanks so much. Could you share an example with us?
One example, I guess, that I have is, in pitching and proposals at so many organizations, so many of my friends' organizations, I'll have a marketing and BD friend working on the proposal, and then a subject matter expert will come in and just drop the pricing in at the last second. This is a very practical example. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, well, what's in the pricing? What's the value proposition? Do we think it's going to look more expensive than our competitors? And if so, have we told the story of why it's actually not going to be more expensive and it's better value in the end? I see a lot of firms doing loss leader proposals. We're going to go in a bit lower than we should because we want to get this first piece of work, build the relationship. And I said, well, have we positioned it that way or given them a call to let them know? And I always tell people, if you want to have a seat at the table in marketing and BD, you don't have to be a pricing expert, but you can always put on the client hat and just ask those questions. What do we think our competitors would be pricing in? Do we know if the client's going for cost here, Or is it bet the firm work where it's really more about managing risk, making sure we don't lose a case? In that case, the pricing isn't typically going to be as important. And again, I think just not being afraid to ask questions.
Such a great point to remind people, just ask all the questions. And Sara, before we started the interview, we got chatting and you told me a bit about the sandwich question, which I understand you're quite well known for asking. Can you please share with us the story of the sandwich question?
Somebody called me many years ago and they're working on this really complex retainer in a practice group I hadn't done much with. And they said, Sara, should we offer them X and then Y can be added on separately? And again, it was very complex, not in my field of expertise. And I just stopped for a second and I said, look, think of it as a sandwich, right? Can they remove that thing? Or do they buy, like if they're buying a cheese and bread sandwich and it's just cheese and bread, they need the cheese and bread, don't offer them as separate prices. But then if the tomato is extra and expensive, sure, say the tomato can be added on for X. I guess it's just having the confidence to step back when something might not be in your area of technical expertise or wheelhouse. And just again, putting your client hat on. I tell people that a lot. I'm sure everyone's tired of my sandwich anecdote. But, even within the firm, I guess I always just encourage people, have a view.
How have you built the confidence? Because I think this seat at the table, voice in the room, diversion, if I want maybe some of our younger listeners to feel empowered from your example, it's harder than it looks. How have you built that confidence to express your view?
I've been lucky in my career in that I made a few big industry, role, geographical changes fairly early. For instance, when I went to General Electric in 2010 in Melbourne, I hadn't worked for a multinational before, hadn't lived in Melbourne before. I think I'd been in Queensland in Australia for a few years at that point. So again, that's quite a big jump to go into a multinational and financial services sectors. And it was for $1 billion commercial finance business. So no pressure either. And I'd made some other fairly big moves before then, maybe nothing that dramatic. But I think as you do make a few jumps around, if you're just thoughtful about, I guess, what's transferable about your soft skills, what do you bring, and then are realistic about what you can learn. So I guess this is kind of an indirect or roundabout answer, but I guess what I learned is to be clear in my own mind about what my value proposition is. When I'm changing roles or changing industries or companies, I don't like to move around much, so I try not to do it. And if you can articulate when you're making a big move confidently to who you're talking to about what your value proposition is, look, it looks like I bring X, Y, and Z. I can stitch things together. I'm client focused, leadership experience, commercial. But again, this is a change in sector. So I would need some additional time to invest in learning X, Y, and Z. And I think if you start to think about it like that, I think it just helps with your confidence. And you've been upfront and transparent when making a change. You've been upfront and I guess transparent with yourself as well, because it is always a bit of a risk moving countries, companies, industries, types of roles. And I think once you've figured out your value prop, that really helps underpin your confidence in navigating a new firm and ongoing. So I would just encourage people to spend a little bit of time just reflecting on, what is your value prop? What do you want people to say when you're not in the room? And again, I think you can build up a lot of confidence from that. Also, I think it's important if you're younger, like if there's a mentorship program, whether formal or informal, this proposal group, APMP, which I was on the board of for many years in Australia, a sister with Icon, another marketing and BD association out in Asia Pac. I did their mentorship program at Icon. And then when I was a bit younger, and then in APMP, we were able to replicate some of the bones of that. And we got great feedback. So again, whether it's formally or informally, I'd really encourage people to find a mentor if they are kind of wanting some encouragement or to talk things through about taking the next step or building their confidence.
How do you ask for a mentor and how do you arrange that for yourself?
I think it depends on what part of the world you're in. But I know out here, again, there's great associations in Asia Pac, ICON, APMP, if you're more of a winning work specialist, that sometimes do formal programs. But I often, through my network, someone's friend is thinking about moving to Singapore, or someone is thinking about moving into a specialized function from pitching, like general marketing and BD, are afraid they'll never get back to general MBD. And a lot of those people I stay in touch with, and I'm always happy to take a call and share experience. So I think putting the word out in your network and seeing if you know anyone, and maybe that's just a quick call versus or a couple of calls instead of a more formal mentorship. But you can also certainly ask around inside your organization as well. I often think it's good to have someone who's, hopefully through managers, people are getting lots of great development and advice. But I think, again, having that external point of view where you can just talk things through, even in a different industry, different type of role, different country, I think that voice is really helpful. So I encourage people to seek them out through their networks or through any associations that are relevant to them.
Okay, Sara, we're nearly there. You've been amazing. Thank you. You have shared so much for a bit of fun, because I believe in fun. Sara Miller, are you ready for a quick fire round?
Please. Excellent.
If you had to give a motivational TED Talk on a random topic, what would it be?
So my not so secret favorite band that would surprise people who haven't been to my office in Bangkok is BTS. So I would somehow try to work BTS and K-pop into a motivational speech, which I think would actually be quite easy and give me an excuse to talk about BTS.
Okay, question 2. What's your favorite way to celebrate a team win?
Karaoke, 100%.
And what's your karaoke song?
This will age me. Don't Stop Believing.
And finally, Sara Miller, what is your favorite spot to work remotely?
Favorite spot would be my home on the Gold Coast, a block from the beach. Laura Keats, palms rustling, go for a swim at lunch.
It's when our best thinking happens, right?
It is.
In a good spot.
10K walk at sunrise. It's a great spot.
Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much. And before we close, is there anything that I've missed that you'd love to add, ask about, talk about, make very clear?
I've been very involved with the winning work pitching proposal sort of specialization space for many years. So if anyone has any questions about what that does or doesn't look like, specifically in Asia Pac, I should say in Asia and Australia, because it's quite different, do feel free again to send me a note on LinkedIn. And if I can help, I certainly will.
Such a generous offer. Thank you, Sara. I am sure our listeners would love to take you up on that.
I'm very committed to anything I can do that can give people different perspectives on what legal marketing and BD looks like here, or pitching as a specialization, that kind of thing. So very happy to be involved. So thank you for thinking of me.
Sara, it's been the absolute best to have you involved. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to you, our listener, for tuning in to Firm Favourites. If you enjoyed this episode, why not come visit us at clerk.io? Clerk automates routine tasks and streamlines workflows, empowering your legal marketing and BD team to focus on strategic growth. And stay tuned, we've got lots more awesome guests coming up on Firm Favourites. So until then, keep well and keep winning.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com. Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.